Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of the Sunflower Nation Women in Leadership. I am so excited to be able to share with you today our guest. She is someone who's actually very near and dear to me. I call her Bestie, but you can call her Miss Nallely Brito. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dr. Banks.
Thank you. So, Naleli and I actually met at our previous place of employment. And that is when we started our friendship. And it has been an amazing journey, probably 12 years,
12,
I think.
12 going on 13.
Yep. Amazing. And so we've celebrated a lot together, both professionally and personally. And so today she's going to just sprinkle some sunflower seeds so that we can learn from her and grow from her. Naledi, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey?
All right. So hello everyone and thank you again, Edith, for having me and asking me to be here. It's definitely an honor. And it feels great. It feels great to be considered as someone who is, a professional, right? When I feel a lot of I think as women we sometimes it's hard for us to identify ourselves in that sense.
Right.
And we'll get into that for sure. But even going into this and reading the waiver and reading everything, I was like, oh, am I really this big? Am I really this important? So I'm very happy to be here, definitely, and share a little bit about me and my journey. But as Edith mentioned, my name is Nallely. I We've known each other for almost 13 years now, working together, uh, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing. I am an adjunct, so I'll start with that, right? What I do now.
Sure.
I am a professor. I teach a number of liberal arts courses and also a few human services courses at Monroe College, and it has been a phenomenal journey and a wonderful experience for me to have gone into teaching. Prior to that, just I guess in a whole, I am a licensed social worker for the state of New York. And I've worked in many different locations with many different populations. I've had the beautiful advantage of working with special needs children, which is where I started my career, working with not only special needs, but also regular needs children in elementary school. Moving up, I did a lot of case management, home visits, working with people with disabilities. Had a wonderful little portion of my journey working with homeless men in a homeless shelter. So it's been a great experience, just dabbling into many different populations in my field. But one area that I always wanted to get into was counseling. That's something that was always my baby, my passion. I loved one-on-ones. I loved group work. Even in the organizations that I worked with, that was my something that I realized was dear and near to me in my field. And so I always wanted to get into higher education. And that's where my journey started and my entrance into Monroe College started, where I wanted to school for me being in the university, in a big university, a huge part that I feel led to my success was the connections that I build and the rapport that I build with my advisors, my counselors, the teachers, the professors, the people that were around me. And I attended Stony Brook University, and Edith, being part of a big
Yep.
university, sometimes you get lost in the sauce, right? And
Absolutely.
so for me, I didn't feel that way. I never felt that way because I had such an amazing advisor, such an amazing group of people in not only my department, social work, but also just in general in school. And that is something that I always wanted to be able to give back. And so getting into higher education was a huge success for me. It was something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to be just like how my advisor was to me, right? So shout out to my advisor, Dorothy Joy. I love her so much. I still am in contact with her even till this day. And I think that that makes a really big deal in someone's success when you are in school. And so that's who I wanted to be. I
You
wanted to
know, as you say that, I think in addition to just um, having being at school is finding the right school.
oh
You
yes.
know, I keep hearing this message over and over again as I speak to different women. You know, the college experience is such a pivotal moment where, and it shapes you, right?
Oh,
So if you're at a school where you feel like you got lost in the sauce, oftentimes in your career, you kind of feel the same way. You don't feel as empowered to speak up and advocate for yourself,
right.
but students or women rather who had really positive college experiences and walked away with great mentors and friends, you know, I see the difference in their ability to grow quicker as professionals. Not to say that others will not become leaders in their industries, but I do see that those who walk out with mentors definitely are able to accelerate quicker.
Oh yeah, even just having those positive connections, right? Not only your mentors, but even having positive relationships or just even a positive experience. I think and it's important that you mentioned that because and we've talked about this in the past, either like there isn't a class, navigation 101 or advocacy 101. We're not taught to negotiate a salary. We're not taught to stick up for ourselves really. And I think that we learn that through our experiences. And that's what shapes at the end of the day who and what we will become, the things we
Absolutely.
will do. So you're absolutely right. It makes a huge difference having that positive experience when you're in college, having that positive experience when you're in school. It does shape whether we want to recognize it or not. It absolutely does shape who we are, how positive or negative we will see a specific situation.
Right,
And
absolutely.
me, when I decided, and it really wasn't a decision, but I got kind of was forced into it. The agency, the organization that I worked for at the time before I applied for Monroe College, we got shut down. We lost funding, and so it was tough for me, but I took that as a moment not to stay down, right? I took that as a moment to, well, what else can I do? And at that time I studied for my licensing exam. I just wanted to build myself up. I said, this is a moment, that for whatever reason I'm getting, and I have to take it. I have to take it. I gotta do something. I cannot just sit here and be sad at the fact that now I have to collect unemployment and now I'm applying to so many jobs a day, and I just have to sit here and wait. No, I said, let me do something with my time. And every morning I would get up, like if I was going to work, I would get up, I would make my breakfast, I would change, because how we feel comes from how we look as well. We
Right,
cannot ignore that. I did my same exact routine just to sit down in my bedroom and study for my exam. And I did this for quite some time, for weeks, for months, leading up to my licensing exam. I took it, I passed it, and then I was like, okay, now what? I have my credentials, I have more, I should be more marketable. And it was still difficult to
mm,
get a job. I went through interviews, but they never, and I was upset when I, didn't get it, but they weren't the right fit. And once I applied to Monroe, and I applied to a position that I knew wasn't for me, I applied to something much lower, but I just wanted to get into the higher education sector. And I met an amazing person who interviewed me, Mr. Cecil Wright, who I absolutely will always, think about him and thank him, because he was such a beautiful and wonderful mentor to me at that time. At that very brief moment, he interviewed me and he said, Nallely, I'm sorry, but you're way overqualified for this position. And I remember wanting to cry, just wanting to feel so sad, because to me, I was like, no, this is my time. This is my time. This is where I want to be. I want to get into higher ed. All these moments where you're trying to get somewhere and it's not working out. And I fell down. I fell down. And he said, but I don't want you to leave, because I think you would be amazing here. You would be an amazing fit at the college. And I said, Okay, thank you. And I didn't leave. And he said to me, I'm going to introduce you to my friend. And I said, okay. And that was, she became my amazing, amazing supervisor and friend, Karen. She was in charge at that time of the Office of Student Development, which was dealing with those traditional graduates coming straight out of high school into college. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. That's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be that counselor. I wanted to be that advisor with my experience, my expertise, everything that just having a wonderful mentor and advisor in college. Now here I was. This is the position that I needed to apply for. And when he introduced me to her, everything went right from that moment on. She interviewed me. At that time I interviewed with 3 other people. It just was such a great day. Feeling so positive and feeling like this is where I was meant to be. This is where I wanted to start. How you would say, my counseling journey. This was the start of it.
That's
And
amazing. There's one thing that you said that kind of resonated with me. You were overqualified for the position you were applying for, and I just want to take a moment to speak on that because, as the research shows, women are graduating at a higher rate than men, and with more advanced degrees. And it's interesting that even with these advanced degrees, women oftentimes still have a hard time securing employment,
yeah,
so when you felt that, when you heard that you're overqualified, did you at any point did you ever feel like, man, I should have never invested in my education? Did you ever regret it?
I didn't. It was just one of those moments where now you're like, okay, so I'm not good enough for this, but I'm also, not great enough for that. What do I do now? What do I do now? Eh, studying for my licensing exam and working so hard to have more credentials, was something that I was very proud of myself, and I was proud just in general. It's something that I've always wanted to do. And so I never regretted that. I never regretted that. But it was a moment where I said, well, what gives? It's like almost like damn if
Right.
you do, damn if you don't. So in that sense, it was that split moment where I said, well, then now what? Or what should I have done? And I knew, Edith, I knew that going into that, applying for that position, I wasn't qualified for that. And I knew it. I was way overqualified. But I wanted, and maybe that's something that we do. We we don't mind starting at the bottom and working our way to the top. And I think that that's something that has shaped who I am. Like, I'm not someone who has ever said, well, I'm above this. I wanted to get into higher ed. So I said, there's mobility. I read everywhere when I did my research or my role, there's mobility, right? And so why wouldn't I start in this area if eventually this is where I want to get? I don't mind that. I don't mind moving up. And I was okay with that at that moment. I'm going to advocate for myself because I have my credentials, so I'll make sure that I stay on top of that, and move myself up. I was okay with that.
You were very lucky to run into Cecil Wright,
Yes,
though, because you could have been hired for that
and
lower
stay stuck.
position, and you could have potentially stayed stuck. And I think that is kind of like the danger zone where,
Yes.
yes, we're humble, even though you have all of these credentials, you're still willing to work your way up, but oftentimes you end up stuck.
Oh yeah.
And comfort is a bad thing. I always say that. Don't get comfortable because you get complacent.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that you were able to interact with somebody who didn't just take advantage of you and put you into that position, but actually saw the great qualities that you had to offer, the expertise you had to offer, and who was able to connect you to where you should have been.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. And in you saying that, it happens in any area, right? Even in the position that you want to be. Because I remember my starting salary was not what it should have been for my credentials.
Mm.
know and in that area, in terms of what you just mentioned in being stuck, I did feel at that moment stuck because I said, well, this is where I want to be, and but how do I get this money to be higher. I have all these credentials. There's other coworkers that don't have the credentials that I do, where perhaps I'm even doing more work and their pay is a lot more. And so how do I navigate that? What do I do? Because you're
How did
right.
you justify that though? How do they justify giving someone with your credentials a lower salary than someone else? What do you attribute that to? Do you think it was some type of discrimination, ageism, because of your race or anything like that? What do you like? Why would that happen?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I think, at that time, I can't say, I wouldn't say anything about discrimination at that time because our office was brown and black, right? So I absolutely wouldn't say it had anything to do with that. I know that it had a lot to do at the time where, when I came in, where times were much better financially prior to me coming in. But still, I still don't see that as a justification. Honestly, and it's been in my experience, if we don't speak up, we're just going to stay there. And I think it's been the expectation, in most organizations. I'm not saying that necessarily this was a case, in my situation, but I've seen it, in speaking with friends and different colleagues. It's almost kind of like you get what you get and you don't get upset. You're here. This is what you want. You're showing enthusiasm. You get what you get and you don't get upset. And it was almost like if I, okay, well, I'm going to prove myself and I'm going to do my work and I'm going to see how that works. And again, I had really great people fighting for me. So I knew I always had that as an advantage. But I needed to do that for me. And at that moment, you mentioned being stuck, right? And I did feel stuck. I felt like, well, I don't want to feel ungrateful. I don't want to seem ungrateful, but I know that I deserve more. I know. So what do I have to do? And I realized that more or gaining more meant I have to take on more, which I didn't find necessarily fair, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why that happens. And in speaking to some of my other, friends and colleagues in different organizations and different positions that they've gone through that as well, it's almost like I mentioned, we're not taught. There isn't a negotiation 101. There
Right.
isn't, we aren't taught to do that. And as female, we're taught to be, and maybe this is a society thing, a cultural thing, almost kind of like be grateful. If you're fighting back, you're considered the angry person, and that's not a quality that you ever want to show.
Right.
You know, and I that's something that you internalize. That's something that you keep and you hold dear. But it's almost kind of like, but until when? Until when?
Right.
Like, I'm
So
happy.
tell me, how long were you stuck? How long did you stay stuck?
I think it took a couple. It took. I want to say it took a couple of years before I actually saw a salary that I was happy with. But it also took higher positions. It took higher positions. So I had to take on a role, where, and again, I had people fighting for me. So that was a wonderful thing. I had a supervisor who said, no, but we also do know the rules. So you know what? Yes, we're going to work for these promotions. We're going to work for these roles, etc. And so it took a couple of years for me to actually see an increase in salary, but it also took the taking of more roles,
But
So
do you feel like that was fair? Because you
no,
said you weren't getting paid initially what you
yeah,
deserved.
yeah.
So when you started getting paid what you felt you deserved, did you feel like at that position that was the correct salary? Or do you think the salary you were given when you got the promotion should have been the
Oh yeah,
salary?
my starting. Oh yeah, it should have definitely been my starting. That should have definitely been the ballpark of my starting salary. Yes, based
Did,
on my
so
credentials.
did you ever catch up with your salary? Like when did you ever feel like based on your title, you were being fairly compensated?
No, no. I always felt that I was, doing more, than what I was being paid for. Definitely, definitely. And this isn't only in this particular organization. Even when I started out, in my career. You always hear about, you go to school, you get your degree, you're gonna have X amount of money, and it wasn't like that. Here I am with a master's degree, and I started out getting paid, when I graduated, maybe in the 30s,
Hmm.
maybe in the 30s, and so that was my no, well, I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna study for my licensing exam. I'm gonna get more credentials. I'm gonna do little works here and there. I did a lot of fee for service work within certain organizations for social work, and that's something that, of course, it served me as a professional, to grow as a professional and grow my experience. But absolutely, you're right. It's something that we I don't feel that I ever necessarily caught up to what I probably should have gotten
So
paid.
do you feel like your friends who graduated with you, were they in a similar boat where, they were finding employment, but they felt like the compensation was not fair? Or was that something that you experienced, kind of in isolation?
I think it was as a whole, as a whole. I
Okay.
was just speaking to a friend of mine who applied and had all the qualifications for a VP position. We graduated together, and she's been in higher ed for years and years and years. And she applied to a new job, and she got it. And the salary to her, she's like, it's a lot less than what I'm making now as a
Wow.
director. And she said it, and she mentioned it, and I said, well, I'm very proud of you for even saying it. And they said, well, we don't have it in the budget right now. And she didn't take it.
Good for her.
She didn't
Good for
take it.
her.
And then she mentioned to me, and again, does it have anything to do with race? I don't know. But she, as she's as a Black female, she said, I don't know if this had to do with my with what they were expecting, because they almost looked at her like, well, what do you mean no? Well, what do you mean you're not okay with this? And so when she said, no, I thank you, but no thank you, she then found out that they offered the position to, I guess the runner up, who's also a Black female, and she said no as well.
That's
And so,
awesome.
yes. And and I was like, that's amazing. And so we don't know what's going on with that position. Hopefully she'll find out and get back to me. But I was very happy, that she was in a moment, at a moment where she's like, I'm worth more than this. Because oftentimes
We
we
don't
don't.
do that.
We don't
We
do
don't
that.
do that. Particularly women of color,
Yes. Because
do
it's
not
only
advocate for
that.
themselves. And I think
No,
you're right. You said it's a cultural thing. A lot of us are raised to you be humble, you be appreciative.
be a
Um,
hard worker. You're gonna get to
right,
where you're gonna
right.
get as
You'll
a
get
hard
there
worker. Don't
eventually.
worry.
But you know what? Why do I have to work twice as hard as someone else to get the same pay they're receiving?
Right.
How does that make sense? So I'm really excited to hear that. And I think this is a great little nugget of information for our listeners to really walk away with. As we have young females going into new roles and positions, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. If
Right.
you think you are worth something, speak up and ask for it. Closed mouths don't get fed.
Right, right. And trusting what you know. And I always say that to my students, trusting what you know, trusting who you are. If you, of course, you don't want to think that you are the last Coca-Cola of the desert, right? But you also want to be true to you. And if you know that you have the qualifications, you have the experience, and that you would be amazing in any organization, I think it starts with that, and don't be afraid to speak. And you're not fighting, you're speaking up. You're saying, well, let me question this a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's
Right,
absolutely nothing wrong with that.
right. So as you grew into higher positions,
Mhm.
how did that affect the rest of your life? Because a lot of women talk about, taking on these roles, they other parts of their lives suffer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how did you balance everything?
I did it. I did it. It was hard for me to balance anything. For me, and for a very, very long time, my life was all about school and work. School and work, school and work, school and work. So I didn't mind taking on more roles. I didn't mind working. I didn't mind, because that's what I had. That's what I had in my life. And so why not engulf my life into this, and I grew, and I had many different positions, and I gained more experience, and it was a beautiful thing because it got me to where I am today teaching, which is a wonderful and great challenge that I went through, but also something that I thought I was very, very passionate about. And that's where I am now. But I realized that I didn't have any work-life balance. It was all about work for me, all about work. And I almost kind of forgot about that other aspect. And my dating life was definitely not something, to rave about, because I, I wasn't going out, right? And it was difficult. Where do I meet people? And it's a lot of those questions that women have, right? Well, where do I meet people? What do I do? I didn't want to go on a dating app. I wanted to meet people in the traditional way, right? But it was very difficult because the more credentials that I had, right, it was almost kind of like my pool was small. My dating pool was small for whatever reason. But I did date, guys even who later on I found out that were intimidated, by me or by my success, which I didn't think at that time. I was like, I'm just working, I'm just working. I'm not,
Right.
there's nothing, uh, phenomenal or unattainable when it comes to me. I am
I
very
think that's just your attitude though, because the
yeah.
first thing you said when we started this interview was, when I got this stuff, I'm like, why me? Like, well, I little old me. Like, there's nothing little about you except for your height. How tall are you, Nallely?
5 feet.
Oh, you made 5 feet.
I
Congratulations.
am taller than
No,
you.
but really, a lot of times we minimize
Yeah.
ourselves,
Oh yeah.
and we don't acknowledge the greatness within us. But
Yes.
I want to go back to something that you said. You mentioned that as you gained greater credentials, your pool got smaller.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Is that, did you change the criteria of the type of man you were willing to date because, you have a master's degree, so you want a man with a master's degree? Or, how did your pool get smaller?
Not because of me, because I for me, my expectations, in dating were always like, as long as you are a nice man, you're educated, and that doesn't necessarily mean, you need to have the same credentials as me. No, as long as we can carry a conversation, as long as you are genuine and nice, right? Because that's what we look for. And someone who can keep up with me, right, in our conversations and goals and being ambitious, right? That's all that I cared about. But it was in my experience, some of the men that I dated were, and I it never said that to me, but I found out through, friends who may have known them. I remember one particular guy, and we had a mutual friend in common, and he just, all of a sudden we just stopped dating. I didn't know why. I didn't. And then later on, I saw my friend, our mutual friend, and he said, well, I had told him that if he uh wasn't, if he didn't, I forgot what words he used, but it was almost kind of like, if you're not working, or if you don't have goals, you can't be with Nallely. You don't waste
Mm.
your time. And the guy was working. He was someone who was, he was working, but I don't know, maybe he didn't feel like maybe because he didn't have a master's degree. I don't know. Maybe he didn't
Do
have
you
a
think
master's.
do you think your friend was just a blocker?
No, no, I don't think so. No, definitely not. That didn't even cross my mind. And I have said to him, well, why would you say that? And he's like, because it's the truth. It's the truth. You are someone who's looking for someone who's at your level. And I'm not talking about educationally, I'm talking about where you want to go in life. You want to, get married, have children. You want someone who is able to grow with you, someone who has goals. And I didn't see that in my friend. And I'm like, well, he could have grown into that. And he was like, well, if he walked away, then he definitely couldn't. He couldn't hack it.
That
And
is
I
true.
thought about that. No one who feels good about themselves or feels good about a particular relationship isn't gonna just walk away because this guy is saying, well, Nallely is someone who's goal oriented. Well, okay, well, what's so wrong about that, right? And so if you if, and I realized I wasn't internalizing things as, well, this is my fault, or maybe I shouldn't be this, or maybe if no, that was the issue of them. It wasn't about me. He was probably insecure about something in his life. He was probably not feeling that he was in his truest potential. I don't know, but that was about him at that time. I never internalized it as, well, because I'm, a professional, or I have a degree, or I have XYZ experience, and that's why I can't date men. No, I just felt that that was something that they were lacking in, and it just showed, but
Right.
it sucked. I'm not going to say that it didn't. It was horrible because it's something that continued to happen to me. And I remember dating one guy um, who he said to me, and he was someone who was very confident in himself, very goal oriented. We have very similar values and qualities. And he said to me, Nallely, for someone who isn't, for a man who isn't confident, you could be very intimidating. And I said, but why? But why? And he's like, no, it's not that you're coming off as someone who, expects and wants, and you need to be this. It's not that. It's just that you're someone who's sure of herself.
Mm.
You're sure of yourself. You're confident. You have a kind heart. You have beautiful qualities. You're hardworking. But that can come off as intimidating to someone who may not have that.
Right.
And they may not even try. And so that's what I mean about my pool getting smaller. And it wasn't until that guy that I dated, said that to me that I said, oh man, then what do I do?
Do you dumb it down?
What exactly, right? And that's something that I was never going to do. I was never
Okay.
going to dumb myself down for anything, not for a man, not for a job, not, for anything, because I've always been sure of myself. I know who I am, and I know the things that I deserve.
And so ultimately, how does the love life look?
So I'm married and I have 3 babies. I have 3 children. So fast forward, I met my husband, and it wasn't easy, Edith. It wasn't easy at that time because I was already at a moment where I'm like, oh, I've already dated all these guys that just for whatever reason didn't live up to my expectations or goals that I have had for my life. And then I met him, and he's very, very genuine person, a very nice person. Uh, wasn't as goal oriented as me, but still wasn't afraid of dating me. Wasn't afraid of getting to know me. He had all similar views as me, and so ultimately, that's something that led right to us dating and us growing and us getting married and having starting our family and having our little children. So
I'm always happy to hear about that. I know your husband personally, and I think he's an amazing guy, and you have beautiful girls together.
thank you.
Tell me about that experience. Now you're a wife. You're still working. You
Hmm.
have your first child. What did life feel and look like at that point?
Good, right? But hard,
Mhm.
and still is very, very hard. As you said, I never stopped working. When I had my first daughter, I took maternity leave, definitely. But it wasn't enough for me. And I knew, and you know me, because you've known me for so long, I've always wanted to start a family. That was my goal. I wanted to be, yes, being a professional, but my bigger goal was I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to start my family. And when I finally got the opportunity to do it and have my baby, it was hard for me to even want to go back to work. I wanted to be with my daughter. I wanted to spend, a lot of time with my daughter. I even took an extra month unpaid because those, 12 weeks wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough. I was having a really hard time going back to work. And just even thinking about all my roles, right? Because prior to this, it was my life.
Right?
I gave so much of me to work, my all my roles, my students, just being present. I never said no. And now here I am thinking, well, how am I going to do this? Because I still have my strong work ethic, you know, but I want to be a mom. I want to be home. I want to spend time with my children, with my child at that time. How do I do this? How do I balance this? And going back to work was hard. Going back to work was really hard, and the expectations of just picking back up from where I left off. And I didn't want to do it. I found myself, getting up and feeling so sad that I had to leave my daughter. Naturally, as many of us moms feel, but I said I almost kind of, it was hard for me to find that balance. How do I do this? How do I?
I think it's important for us to talk about that because,
Yes.
a lot of women go into leadership roles. They get married, they have their family, they feel like they have it all, right? Can you really have it all though? And, you almost feel bad if you're excited to go to work and you feel bad if you have to leave your child. So it's
Yeah.
like this tug of war internally that you're facing,
Right.
so how did you cope with that? How did you balance?
It was definitely, oh, it was a point of my life where I didn't know what to do. I felt lost, and I wanted to still be that professional. I wanted to work. I wanted to be a working mom, right? Why not? I wanted to show my daughter that you can absolutely, do it all, but at what cost, right? It's either I
Mm.
felt I was failing at work or I was failing as a mom. If I couldn't stay late or said no to certain things that before I used to say yes to at work, it was almost like, well, am I being looked down at? You know, for being a woman, for being a mom, and for wanting to be home. What do I do here? And so that was really hard. And I had really great coworkers who absolutely didn't mind, like helping me out and making sure that I was okay. And I was a mom, a breastfeeding mom, right? So here I am needing to take now even extra time, pumping to make sure that I could bring, milk to my daughter. And so even that was a strain because I'm like, well, I have to close my door, X amount of time during the day. How are people looking at me? Are people looking at me like I'm slacking in my job? And so it was definitely tough. It was tough. And I wanted to be home, but I didn't want to let go of work. So I couldn't find that balance. I didn't know how to. I
Mm.
absolutely didn't know how to. And at that time, I had on an even new role, right, of Title IX coordinator at that moment. And so now I'm like, now I have to split myself even more. How do I do this? How do I do this?
And all this while being married.
And all this while being married.
How were you maintaining your relationship?
It was hard. We weren't seeing each other as much as we used to, but yet the expectation of my roles didn't change. It was
Mm.
like, well, you got this. You can do this. You're Nallely. You can you can go to work and you can come home and you can, you know, prepare dinner and feed the child because you're a superhero.
Mm.
Even though those words weren't necessarily said out loud, that was the mentality, and it wasn't what I thought. This was what was going on. My husband definitely saw it as, not that he was doing less, but that I got it, that I'm someone who's always managed. So why not? Why would that change? But we know as moms, our hormones are all over the place too, right? So we cannot ignore the biological aspect of what's going on with us. So now throw that all together with the social piece, right?
Mhm.
Family factors and all those different dynamics. And what do you have, right? Chaos, potentially chaos. And so that was even harder for me because I didn't feel that I had, someone who stopped and said, "Wait, but how are you? I
Right.
I know you got this because you've always, been this person, but how really do you feel?"
So all the research in around the study of the strong Black woman
Mhm.
really points to exactly what you're saying. People not stopping to ask you, but what I find even more troubling is, did you ever ask for help?
No, I didn't. I
So
didn't.
how do people help?
You're right.
How does somebody know that you're struggling if you're putting on a brave face every day and just
Yeah.
doing what you think you have to do by yourself, right?
Right. Right.
When there may have been different support systems that could have been put in place to help you better balance all of that chaos.
You're right. You're right. You're right. And I think that that's upbringing, that's cultural, that's something that I learned very little, that and for me, I have all these, great qualities of being someone who's strong, of being someone who is, independent, and I got this, right? Like my husband says, but you got this, this. And so you're right. I didn't ask for help at the beginning. It was just something assumed, and it's sad because it's like, okay, I didn't ask for help, but you also see that I'm not all right. So there also has to be that balance there. And sometimes that it's like a blurred line, right? It's like a blurred line. And you're right, we have to speak up. We do have to ask. And us women, sometimes we don't. And maybe because we're taught to do this, we don't want to seem less than, we don't want to feel weak, or we don't want to feel or even seem, especially in the professional sector,
Excuse
bless
me.
you, in the professional sector, that we can't do it, right? We don't want to seem less than. And I think all of that played a role. But one thing that I did do at that time, I said, I can't continue this way. I have to put me first. What can I do? How can I still be a professional, have my career, be a career woman, but be at home more with my child? And Edith, I saved. I made sure that I, wasn't, spending, I was saving. And I
And no,
spoke to
we
my
stopped
husband.
going out to brunch.
We stopped going out. Exactly. We weren't going out as much. And I spoke to him and I said, I'm taking a step back. I'm not going to work full time. But don't worry, I've saved up enough money to be able to do that, And when I spoke to my department heads, and I said, I don't want to work full time anymore. I need to take a step back for me, for my mental health, for my emotional well-being, because I wasn't okay, in terms of, I was trying to split myself up in so many places and I still wasn't happy. So I said, no, I am going to figure out a way where I can still do everything and be happy. I need to find that internal happiness. And I did. When one of the roles that I had during my time at the college was teaching. I got into teaching. I started teaching my courses, and I loved it. And so when I decided to take a step back from my full-time counseling position, I said, but I'll teach if you'll have me. And my VP at the time was amazing. She's like, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you. And absolutely, yes. We love to have you in any department that we can absolutely have you. We have you in student services, but we'll absolutely accept you back into academics. And that has been the biggest blessing for me. I had the opportunity to continue being a career woman, right? And still spend more time with my child. And Edith, that things happen for a reason, right? And at that time, right before I started that semester, I found out that I was pregnant with twins. And of course, everything comes to your mind. And again, I never stopped working. I continued. I continued. I started teaching. I continued teaching. I had time for my daughter. Then I found out being pregnant with twins. Still kept going. I still kept going because that's just who I am. And I loved what I was doing. I loved everything that I was doing. I was finally at a moment where I loved every aspect, being
Hmm.
having more time at home, and also teaching, being with my students in the classroom. and even till this day has been my blessing in disguise, and I absolutely am so passionate about it and love doing it. Yes, was it a huge pay cut from full time to adjunct? 100%, definitely was a huge pay cut. And yes, there are times where I say, should I go back, but and it's something that I'm thinking about and something that I'm working thinking of, what to do moving forward. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't
Mm.
change it for the world. I love this aspect of me now, right? Where even though working from home is hard, you have your children, you're here, you're the responsibilities and the roles don't change, right? So I'm still here. I have to make sure that my children are being fed, that they're bathed, right? That they're napping, and still having time to grade my papers, to do my work, because my roles don't stop when my class ends, and so that's something that has been another challenge, right? That I'm learning how to balance. But I can't say that, I can say that it's gotten easier in the sense that I feel a bit more fulfilled.
Oh,
I
that's a
feel a bit
wonderful
more fulfilled.
statement. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. There's one thing I want to go back to. You mentioned when you were making that transition from full time to part time, you had to come to, your supervisor and explain that may have been feeling overwhelmed or you wanted to spend more time with your kids. Do you feel like that was a moment of weakness?
No, that was finally a moment where I advocated for myself.
Good for you.
And
That's
let
what I
me
was
tell you,
hoping you would
I
say.
felt good. I felt good when I wrote that letter
Resignation.
of
Mm,
resignation. I felt good because never did I think that I would, do something like that. And we're taught, like you said, you asked that question for a reason, Edith, right? Moment of weakness as a woman, right? But I never, not once, saw it like that. I saw myself being and feeling so empowered, where I
that's
was finally
amazing.
sticking up for myself. And I was saying, no, I am not going to continue doing this and splitting myself up in thousands of pieces so that I can be, not only feel professional, but also seem to others. And I was done doing that. And I was happy. I was happy that I advocated for myself. And even the VP at that time said, she even looked at me like, yeah, good for you. She wasn't happy to lose me in that sector, but she was happy to gain me in academics. But at the same time, I can tell that she was proud of what I was doing. She was proud that I was sticking up for myself, that I was standing up for myself. And she said, our doors are always open. You let me know when you want to come back to being full time. I will always be here for you. And I truly believe that, and to have that option, it's not an option that many women have, to be
Right.
able to have that option. I said, why am I not going to take that? I need to think about my well-being for a change rather than everyone else that I always took care of. Right? Doesn't mean that I'm less than, doesn't mean that I am not doing my duty. It doesn't mean that I'm letting go of responsibilities. Absolutely not. I'm just thinking of me first. At this moment, I need to think about me. And I was happy. And I will never change how I feel or how I felt about it back then. It's still one of the best decisions that I feel I've made in my career, but also as a mom. As a mom.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So many women, I think, want to do exactly what it is that you've done. But there is this fear
Mm-hmm.
instilled in us. And so we hold ourselves back.
Oh yeah.
And we almost stay in that state of chaos and feeling run down and
And
feeling
as you said earlier,
overwhelmed,
stuck. There's that feeling of
stuck.
stuck again, not only professionally, but also in your family dynamics.
Right. And you can love your husband and love your kids and love your job, but still feel stuck
Yeah,
because it's just too much. But I
right.
think it's amazing that you have been able to find that balance for yourself. And I do know, I'm sure that our women who are listening are inspired by this. And I hope that, you know, given the situation, they would advocate for themselves as well and ask for help when needed, because you doing that actually was you being transparent and having a moment of vulnerability. And there's no weakness in that. There's actually
No,
strength in that. To
right.
be able to have the courage to do that is quite amazing.
We're human, and why not show that? Why not show that human side? It's there's nothing wrong with, regardless of what society has made us believe, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong in thinking about you. And let me tell you, it's still something that I struggle with every day, Edith, right? Even just, working from home makes it 10 times harder. So finding, and we haven't seen each other in a while,
Right.
yeah, pandemic and family and schooling and XYZ, but also finding that time. So I'm still, struggling with finding balance, but overall, I started it. I started that trend, and I'll continue figuring it out, but the one important thing, and I would say that I would never change, is that I took that opportunity. I found that opportunity and I took it, so that I can feel good about me. There was
For
no
sure.
way that my children were going to be great if I wasn't. And so
Mm.
that's something that has stuck with me, and still sticks with me now, when I'm thinking about my career, when I'm thinking about the things that I have to do, or feeling overwhelmed or doing XYZ. I always say to myself, well, you did it. You advocated for you finally, and you're not taking that back. And why should I take that back? It's something that gave me great pleasure. It's something that still gives me great pleasure. And I'm not, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't go back to that.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank
That
you.
was amazing.
Thank
So,
you.
my last question for you is what advice would you give to up and coming female professionals?
Don't forget about you. Just, yes, be goal oriented. You got to where you got for a reason, with hard work, with wonderful efforts. You've built on that. You've built upon yourself and your professionalism, but we're also human. Right. So don't ignore that little voice that's saying to you, hold up, hold up, hold up. You may not be okay. Take a step back, right? And advocate. Don't be afraid to find that mentor, to seek someone who can help you, because many times we stay in this position of stuck because we're not willing to speak up, as with everything that we mentioned, right? Feeling weak, or but I want to continue to always seem strong. I don't want to be that woman that falls, right? And we're so sometimes preoccupied with that we forget about ourselves.
Mm.
And that's, feel good about you. Feel good about you. When you feel good about yourself, you won't let you down. And I think that that's the best thing that I can say, and it's something that I learned. You're not weak because you ask for help. You're not weak because you want things. You're not weak or angry or too strong when you are advocating for yourself, when you are speaking up about what are your credentials and your expertise and your experience and who you are. So stay true to you, continue on with your qualities, but always take care of you as well. Don't let go of that just because you think that this is what you need to do.
Thank you so much, Nallely. I really appreciate you
You're
being a
welcome.
guest today. I appreciate you sharing so much of yourself and your journey with us. I definitely feel inspired through
Oh, thank
listening to you. I want to definitely thank our listeners today for joining us. Our heart be filled with the brightness of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest days. This is Dr. Edith Banks with the Sunflower Nation. We will see you next time. Wishing you love and positive vibes.